Read people like a book. Some people seem naturally gifted at understanding others. The truth is, writes conversation coach Patrick King, that this ability is not really anything mystical, but a skill like any other that can actually be learned and mastered. To demonstrate that point, in his thoughtful and wide-ranging study of human behavior, Read People Like a Book, praised by some as a modern companion to Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, he closely examines the many ways we can learn to better analyze and understand other people's emotions, thoughts, and intentions. So, get ready to discover how to become a much sharper reader of people yourself. What you're doing wrong. Most people believe they are far better judges of character than they really are. That helps explain so much of the pain and disappointment in the world. Just think about it. How many times have you heard someone who claims to be good with people complain that their ex later turned out to be a total jerk? If they were truly good judges of character, should they not have seen that from the beginning? After all, character rarely transforms completely in just a few weeks or months. It is easy to say afterward that all the signs were there. Spotting them in advance is what King's book is really about. There are several reasons we are much worse at judging character than we imagine. The main one is that we are biased creatures. In other words, we are wired to instinctively treat some things as more true than others. That is because the brain is primarily a survival mechanism, not a machine for detecting truth. On the other hand, this is also exactly why reading other people is possible. But before you can do that well, you must first learn to read yourself. We become great people readers when we understand ourselves, King writes. We need to know what biases, expectations, values, and unconscious drives we bring to the table so we are able to see things as neutrally and objectively as possible. Besides our built-in lack of objectivity, another reason we are naturally poor judges of character is that we tend to look for general signs rather than context-specific ones. Put differently, unless you know how a person behaves around others, you cannot tell whether what you are noticing is unusual behavior or simply their normal baseline. That is why articles like 5 Telltale Signs Someone Likes You are often useless. A warm smile, or even a touch on the arm, for instance, may mean nothing if that person behaves the same way with everyone. Analysis can only happen with data, not a single datum, King notes. In real analysis, we should not be hunting for isolated signs, but for recurring patterns. Motivation as a behavioral predictor. Since the time of ancient Rome, one of the first questions investigators have asked when trying to identify a suspect is, cui bono? Who benefits? Indeed, without a clear motive, it is hard to connect a crime to a person, because whatever we do, we usually do with some purpose in mind. That is why understanding what motivates people in general is a strong starting point if you want to become better at reading people in particular. As King puts it, if you can zoom in and really grasp a person's true motivations, you can understand them so much better, perhaps even to the point of being able to predict how they might act in the future. Fortunately, there are several broad models of motivation that provide a useful framework. Here are 3 of the most important. The pleasure principle. First imagined by Aristotle in ancient Athens and later popularized by Sigmund Freud around the turn of the century, the pleasure principle claims that the reptilian part of the brain is always trying to pursue pleasure and avoid pain. This simple rule can help you understand people much more clearly. Whenever you are trying to figure out why someone acted a certain way, ask yourself what pain they were trying to escape and/or what pleasure they were hoping to gain. Keep 2 general principles in mind. First, People usually work harder to avoid pain than to obtain pleasure. Second, people's perceptions of pleasure and pain often influence them more than the actual reality does. The pyramid of needs. First introduced by Abraham Maslow in 1943, his hierarchy of needs is probably the most famous motivation model in psychology. It proposes that throughout life, people pursue similar categories of needs, best represented by a 5-level pyramid with the most basic needs at the bottom. Higher needs only begin to matter once lower ones have been satisfied. The levels in Maslow's hierarchy are physiological needs, safety, love and belonging, self-esteem, and self-actualization. So when trying to understand people, look for both what level they are operating from and which needs may still be unmet. Defense of the ego. Even though it often works unconsciously, this is one of our strongest motivators. Simply put, we often try to protect our ego from anything that might make us feel psychologically diminished. In doing so, we distort reality and even deceive ourselves to the point where we can no longer accept the truth. The ego uses many defense mechanisms to shield itself, including denial, rationalization, projection, sublimation, regression, displacement, repression, and reaction formation. It is important to remember that when the ego is involved, it can overshadow other motivations. So take that into account whenever you are analyzing why someone did or failed to do something. The body, the face, and clusters. Not only do actions speak louder than words, they also seem to speak much more often. According to some studies, only about 7% of communication comes from the actual words we say, while as much as 55% comes from facial expressions and body language. So it is not an exaggeration to say that when it comes to reading people, your eyes may be more useful than your ears. But of course, you need to know how to use them, what to observe, and what to look for. Here are some basics. Facial expressions. We use two kinds of facial expressions, macro expressions and micro expressions. Macro expressions are larger, slower, and more obvious, but they are also consciously produced, which makes them easier to fake. Micro expressions, by contrast, are incredibly quick, almost unperceivable and unconscious, which is why they are the real clues you should pay attention to. American psychologist Paul Ekman pioneered the study of micro-expressions. He identified 6 universal emotions: happiness, sadness, disgust, fear, surprise, and anger, and found that each has its own subtle facial signature. Many of his books describe these expressions in detail, so the next time you visit a library, it may be worth seeking out Paul Ekman's work. Body language. Like facial language, body language is innate, primitive, emotional, and often automatic. As former FBI agent Joe Navarro, an expert in the field, once put it, the human body can be a kind of billboard that advertises what a person is thinking. For instance, when someone is anxious or angry, they often unconsciously contract inward, as if trying to hide their body. By contrast, relaxed people tend to expand and take up more space. Likewise, rubbing the forehead may indicate emotional strain, while fidgeting with a tie or necklace can suggest an internal conflict. Personality science and typology. Personality is usually defined as a distinctive set of behaviors, thoughts, and emotional tendencies that characterize an individual. In the context of reading people, it may be even more useful to think of personality as a persistent pattern of behavior over the long term. No theory of personality will fully explain a specific individual, but most of them can still help you gain a broader understanding of the fundamental axes on which people differ. The following theories are especially well known for good reason. The Big Five. Going back to 1949, the Big Five was one of the earliest psychological attempts to classify people according to specific traits instead of entire fixed types. It reduces personality to 5 traits, easy to remember with the acronym OCEAN: openness to experience, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. Each trait exists on a spectrum with 2 extremes, and every person falls somewhere along that range. For example, while no one is a pure extrovert or a pure introvert, those labels still help describe a person's general tendency. You cannot really be neutral on the spectrum. The Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, MBTI. The MBTI is one of the most popular self-report personality tools. It is based on 4 major dichotomies, which you can think of as traits similar to those in the Big Five. These deal with your general orientation toward others, introverted, extroverted, how you take in information, sensing, intuitive, how you evaluate information, thinking, feeling, and how you organize your life, perceiving, judging. Altogether, these combinations create 16 personality types. Even though it remains extremely popular, the MBTI has clear flaws. It not only sorts people into a limited set of boxes, almost like a horoscope, but also gives people different results depending on their mood when they take it. Still, having a broad sense of someone's personality type can be useful when trying to understand them. The Keirsey Temperament Sorter, KTS. Closely related to the MBTI, the KTS organizes similar information in another format. Instead of 16 types, it groups people into 4 major temperaments, each with 2 role variants. These temperaments are guardian, artisan, idealist, and rational. Guardians may be administrators or conservators. Artisans may be operators or entertainers. Idealists may be mentors or advocates, and rationals may be coordinators or engineers. According to Keirsey, 4 out of 5 people fall into either the guardian or artisan group. The Enneagram. Developed by Bolivian psycho-spiritual teacher Oscar Ichazo and Chilean psychiatrist Claudio Naranjo, the Enneagram is a model of the psyche that identifies 9 broad personality types: reformer, helper, achiever, individualist, investigator, loyalist, enthusiast, challenger, and peacemaker. Each type consists of a certain cluster of traits, so it works in a way somewhat similar to Keirsey's temperaments. It shares many of the same weaknesses. It is simplistic and difficult to test because of its vagueness. Still, when it comes to reading people, even imperfect knowledge may be better than none at all. Lie detection 101. Just as almost everyone thinks they are a good driver or a strong judge of character, most people also assume they are good at spotting lies. In reality, that is rarely true. A 2006 study in the Forensic Examiner found that most people are generally poor lie detectors. Another study, published the same year in Personality and Social Psychology Review, found that only 50 out of 20,000 people could identify liars more than 80% of the time. That means 99.75% of people are no better at detecting deception than random chance. As any FBI agent would tell you, lie detection is difficult and far from an exact science. Even so, there are a few useful principles that can help. Focus on the conversation. Lies are often more complicated than the truth, so watch for stories that are excessively wordy and delivered all at once, as well as inconsistencies and delays. Use surprise to your advantage. Ask open-ended, unexpected questions. The quicker they come, the harder it is for a liar to keep their story consistent. Increase the cognitive load. Stay skeptical and press for details. If a person's emotional expression does not match what they are saying, or if they seem to be buying time, they may be lying. Watch the body. Words can conceal what the body reveals. When people lie, they often blink more, show more slips of the tongue, experience pupil dilation, and display disturbances in speech. Lean back and let them talk. Silence can sometimes detect lies better than interrogation. So let the other person volunteer information rather than dragging it out of them. Stay calm and casual. Trust your gut. It is not wise to rely only on intuition, but neither should you depend entirely on your conscious reasoning. Sometimes your unconscious mind picks up details your conscious mind has not yet noticed. Using the power of observation. Given enough time, room, and evidence, almost anyone can eventually detect an imposter, whether that person is just a liar or a full-blown fraud. But in real life, we rarely have the luxury of time to establish a person's baseline behavior or identify deep patterns. Most of the time, we are forced to make quick judgments about people's character. Here are a few tools that can help. Thin slicing. The ability to detect patterns in people or events from only a small amount of information is called thin slicing. In everyday language, we call it making snap judgments. Psychologists have found that in high-stakes or survival-type situations, these quick judgments can be surprisingly accurate. So, when there is no time to gather more data, trust your initial unconscious reaction, your intuition. Overthinking someone or ignoring your gut can sometimes lead to serious mistakes. Pay attention to word choice. If you do have time to support your initial impression with more evidence, begin by listening to the language people use. For example, people who use more vivid and emotionally loaded language when saying something negative often tend to be more neurotic. By contrast, more positive people are less likely to use words like disgusting or phrases such as sick of. Using unnecessarily complex vocabulary can suggest a strong desire to appear intelligent, while using military or hunting metaphors in dating talk may unconsciously reveal how a person really sees the opposite sex. Be a Sherlock Holmes. You can learn a lot from the way someone smiles. A Duchenne smile is genuine and involves the whole face. A Pan Am smile, by contrast, appears only in the mouth. Clothing can also reveal quite a bit. A lack of care in appearance may reflect low self-esteem or depression. On the other hand, obvious status symbols may indicate someone who is either faking it to make it or feels insecure in their social role. People's homes and belongings can be read much like their bodies because they are extensions of personality. As a general rule, a welcoming home suggests a sociable person, while a neglected room may point to a more neurotic one. Active observation. Many other clues can help you figure out what kind of person someone is. Consider their online behavior and the kinds of photos they post on Instagram. Are the images casual or carefully staged? If they are polished, do they communicate perfectionism naturally or with strain? What kind of person wants to appear more perfect than they really are? Ask yourself questions like these, and you will begin to form a clearer picture of someone's personality. Ask hypothetical questions, such as, "What would you do if you got $1 million?" to better understand who people are underneath, including their hidden desires, values, and self-image. Final notes. Read People Like a Book feels less like a typical self-help title and more like an encyclopedia of useful ideas. In other words, it offers many insightful concepts, even if it does not provide a huge number of directly actionable techniques. But then again, practice is always more effective when it rests on theory, and Read People Like a Book serves as an excellent theoretical introduction to the art of reading people, as well as a valuable guide to related studies and books.